Ooh, Bad Larry.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Bad Larry Kingdom. I'm your host, Bad Larry, and today is bittersweet for me as we are wrapping up the X Factor series with issue number 70, the Muir Island Epilogue. Epilogue meaning kind of part of the series, but not really. It's a filler. This cover by Mike Mignola, and no offense to him, is probably my least favorite in the series. Maybe because it represents the end of this X Factor team, which I love so much. Or maybe because I just think it's not great art. It's too dark, and the characters all look like they're claymation. But before we jump into the issue, here are my top 5 covers of this series, starting with number 5. Issue number 60, drawn by John Bogdanoff, is on here because my favorite character is Cyclops, and I have a real younger brother in real life, and his favorite character is Havok. So we would always argue about who was winning this fight on this cover. We both had this issue, and we would argue over and over who was cooler. I love the action and movement and how both characters' outfits are being destroyed, and I love how Bogdanoff made each character super ripped because their powers are amping each other up. I just love it. Issue number 10's cover, drawn by Walter Simonson, is just so epic and classic. It really pops, right? Of course, my favorite character, Cyclops, being featured big and bold in the middle with my favorite look of his, the skull cap. He's buff, but not super buff. He's looking to be about 31 or 32 years old. Plus, this being a 25-year Marvel anniversary issue is just so cool. Simonson also nailed the other characters around the border. Many of them, like the black suit Spider-Man, the way he drew Namor and Captain America, the brown suit Wolverine, the blue masked Shadow Cat, Thor, Daredevil in his classic look. Everyone is depicted in the costume that I like the best. But as much as I truly love this cover, it still can't make it to the top 3. Issue number 37, also drawn by Walter Simonson, is so epic. There is nothing bad I can say about it. Madeline Pryor looks amazing as hell. The colors really pop. This cover really stands out, and it is part of the Epic Inferno series. I remember this cover vividly in my mind from when I first had it as a kid. I was enamored by the Goblin Queen. I mean, how can you not? All that thigh. Trying to draw this cover so many times, and it is technically wonderful. Walter placed the hot character right in the center, drawing your attention in. All the line work, the symmetry, the colors, it's wonderful. And in the silver place, how can I not put the first issue right here? This is where it all kicks off. It is so iconic, this cover, drawn by both Walter Simonson with the help of Joseph Rubinstein. While it may seem basic, it just has so much nostalgia for me. It just makes me happy looking at it. Also, there's a bit of biblical elements to this issue. And then the next, number 1, a full circle, if you will. Cyclops is in his blue and yellow to start this series, and the title is Baptism of Fire, but baptism is the key here. Baptism referring to the start of a new thing. I also love green on Marvel Girl, and as much as I love the red and yellow costume, I think Marvel Girl is best in green and yellow. And if you guys know me, if you know Bad Larry, this issue had to be my number 1. Issue number 68, drawn by Wilce Portacio. And this is my favorite cover in the series. It's the whole reason Cyclops became my favorite hero. Having to let go of his son in this issue to go to the future, and then absolutely destroying Apocalypse with his supercharged optic blast. This cover just screams nostalgia and badassery to me. And this is really the end of the series for me as well. To tie in with issue number 1, Cyclops is back full circle in his blue and yellow, But this issue is titled Bitter Sacrifice, tying into the baptism issue number 1, the start, and sacrifice in this issue representing the end. So it's very biblical, like Jesus. Jesus got baptized, then he sacrificed himself. In X Factor, we started with the baptism, and in this issue, in my opinion, the end of the series ended titled with the sacrifice. So it's very cool. It's very clever. But y'all let me know in the comments what cover was your favorite in this series. This issue was drawn by the recently departed Peter David. R.I.P. Peter. And this is drawn by Kirk Jarvinen. This issue, much like the first page, just feels a bit empty. But I get it. They have to put something out there and try to wrap up the series as it transitions into something else, and these transitions usually feel awkward and clunky. Professor X is in his son's mind because Legion is now in a deep coma after the Shadow King was forcefully expelled from his psyche. All the empty space is intentional as it represents Legion's mind. Currently, there's nothing there. Professor X is walking through the void that is Legion's mind, and we see there is some gray added, and then out of the blue, a payphone appears. We learn later that this is not Legion's doing, but it's Professor X's subconscious creating these images, the colors, and everything going on. As the first image, the empty white of nothing, that's what's really going on in Legion's mind. He's a goner, baby. Professor X picks up the payphone. He's trying in vain to find Legion's mind. The voicemail says, "There is no one here to take your call." Which is true. Legion's mind is long gone. At least for the here and now. All these interactions are being created by Professor X's subconscious within Legion's mind. Out in the real world, Professor X's body is still recovering from the battle with Shadow King, and his legs are jacked up. He really should be resting himself, but here he is in Legion's mind. Everyone is so concerned about Professor X, except Wolverine. Wolverine says, "Charles is a tough old bird," which is actually a huge compliment coming from the likes of Wolverine. When I reread this issue the other day, I said to myself, "Wolverine, you can't be smoking in here. This is a hospital, man. And where are your sleeves? Why are you still wearing those gloves? You look silly." Hilariously, right after I said that to myself about the smoking, Moira MacTaggart says the same thing, telling Wolverine to put out that cigarette. And Wolverine just eats it, just to show how gnarly he is. Jean says, "Didn't that hurt?" And Wolverine replies, "Like nobody's business." Which shows that Wolverine, in some ways, either enjoys the pain or he uses pain to control his temper and not just chops everyone's head off. And to show that all the damage that he endures in the battles, he feels it just like one of us. But he fights through it and heals and endures it again, which is why people love him. He's just so badass. Well, not everyone loves him, like Cyclops, rightly so, as Wolverine's be too frisky with Cyclops' girl at times. This issue was titled Odds and Ends, like when you're shopping or you're packing, these odds and ends are not really that important, much like this issue. Like here, we see Archangel flying and Colossus waves at him. Whoopee! Was this just to make sure all the characters are shown in the issue? And then here we got Beast reciting some long-ass poem for no reason. And then he and Forge make a corny joke at Colossus' expense. It's filler. Professor X is still trying to find Legion in there somewhere. There's a wall, but an opening in the wall, and then some stairs. Again, Professor X is creating this all himself, his subconscious. Legion is not doing this at all. Professor X is just grasping at straws at this point with Legion, and then Cyclops and Jean hold hands. It's the timing here. It just feels clunky. And then we move to Rogue interacting with her mom Mystique. I feel there are way too many panels or pages for this interaction. Agent Cooper recaps what actually happened to her, how Mystique assumed her identity for a while. She was at the edge of the Shadow King's control, and when Shadow King pushed her to shoot Mystique, well, she fought the urge and then tried to shoot herself instead. It's valiant, but she obviously didn't finish the job. She just grazed herself. This is when S.H.I.E.L.D. determined that they were going to use Mystique as an insider to counter some of the Shadow King's plans, which was super key as Mystique was the catalyst in ending the Shadow King by killing his human host, Agent Rice. Rogue is all but hurt that Mystique didn't send her some cryptic clue that she was still alive and that she had to be so sad for so long thinking Mystique was really dead, like she was entitled to this super secret information. But in reality, telling Rogue would have ruined the mission because Rogue was taken over by the Shadow King and would have spilled the beans that Mystique was impersonating Valerie Cooper. Her whole cover! The entire mission would have been at risk if Rogue had that information. So no, Rogue, you couldn't have been told in order to keep the mission safe. Rogue pouts a bit, but then she and Mystique hug it out. But this whole interaction took far too long in this issue, in my opinion. There's a mini theme going on here in this issue. Two people trying to mend their relationship, like Professor X with Legion, Cyclops and Jean holding hands, and Rogue and Mystique trying to mend their relationship, and then you have Wolverine and Jubilee. But with Jubilee and Wolverine, Jubilee doesn't like this idea of him and her splitting up. She's throwing a little tantrum, and in truth, her character was created to be the Robin-esque sidekick for Wolverine. And she even says so here, quote, "We're a team like Batman and Robin." She throws a little tantrum and runs off like she does, but we all know that they stay teammates as part of the X-Men Blue Team. So this is really all for naught. This issue feels less like an X-Factor issue and more like a real transition issue, which is, I guess, what it's meant to be. Polaris is reintroduced as well, as we all really know her to be, the hot, green-haired girl Magneto. Her character went through a lot of changes recently, so this is the attempt to reset her. She's working on her magnetic powers. They're quite rusty, and Strong Guy goes full creepo, telling her to stretch those arms up, put those hips back, just so he can goon on her. I mean, do you really blame the guy, though? This is how playful Banner is created, though. So let's not get so offended by everything, alright, people? Valerie Cooper really introduces the change of guard right here, saying the government is going to reinstate the Freedom Force program, which will become the Havok-led X-Factor team that will include both Polaris and Strong Guy depicted here. So the whole mission of X-Factor being a government agency is really solidified right here in these panels, where the Cyclops X-Factor team initially pretended to be a government agent, but that was just so they could hide their identities. We need to wrap up this little adventure Professor X is having in Legion's head. The Professor's subconscious is creating all these cliches of someone who's brain dead. A stairway leading to nowhere, a house with all the lights on but nobody's home, and then Jean shows up and clears the way for Professor X to accept that all these illusions, he's creating them. He just has to let Legion go. The dude is totally gone. In a recent video that I've made, we saw in the 2025 X-Men series written by Jed MacKay that he writes Professor X out of the world. He's sending Professor X off to the Shi'ar Empire. To him, Professor X had to go and do something else. There needed to be a passing of the torch. But not here in 1991. Professor X is still the main guy. He is still the nucleus. His dream is still the epicenter of the stories to come. So these last 2 pages we're seeing are just basically glazing up Professor X as being so important, he's so needed, he's still the guy. Now these 2 pages are kind of cringe and pointless. There's a game of telephone where the news of Professor X being okay, Professor X is okay, spread the word around. Why couldn't Professor X just link into everyone's mind at once and say, hey everyone, I'm okay? Or just have Jean Grey do it. This little telephone game is whack, and the only redeeming frame in these 2 pages is when Jubilee, still having her tantrum, says, who cares? Exactly my sentiment, Jubes. And then Professor X has to kind of finally let Legion, his son, go. He's going to have to just leave him in his coma-like state for the time being, which is fine. Legion is too powerful and crazy to leave him out there just roaming around willy-nilly. They need to save him coming back for another storyline. And for the final send-off, the final page before they introduce the new team in next issue number 71, which is the Havok-led team, they don't even include the X-Factor team? Really? Professor X says, what's he gonna do with 14 X-Men? Which is a good point. The original X-Men team were only 5 members, and this is why I guess in the Jim Lee X-Men they needed a blue and a gold team. He wanted to include as many of these characters as possible, but these teams need to be small-ish, 5 to 8 members max. On a side note, notice how much taller Strong Guy is than Colossus, which is a huge art blunder for me. Sure, we know Strong Guy is big, but he's only 7 feet tall, whereas Colossus is 7'7". These two should be swapped places, but it is what it is. I told myself I was going to do issues 1 through 70 before Marvel officially relaunched X-Factor with the new Havok team, but for me, X-Factor ends with issue number 68. My final thoughts on this 70-issue series, which encompassed 6 years, multiple writers and artists, is that as a whole, I still love it. The Inferno series changed the game with the tie-ins. This series brought us Apocalypse, as well as changed Archangel for the next nearly 50 years. The duo of Luis and Walter Simonson in these beginning issues is just hard to beat. And I know I will continue to come back to certain issues in this series and flip through them, as there were some epic stories, epic art, and a nostalgia level that really just makes me happy. Thanks everyone for the support during this run review. Now, on to the next one. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you real soon. Peace.